It's opening up that
Perfect.
browser.
Okay, so on your browser, you're going to want to close whatever window that just opened. Otherwise, you're going to have a crazy echo. But you have just live streamed this to YouTube so all the parents and everyone can be watching.
Okay, so
We're totally good. I'm going to leave the meeting because you're the host, so I don't think I'm going to end anything. So I will see you guys. If Sherry, you have my cell phone. I think everyone should.
I actually have Laura's cell phone.
Okay, that works too. That's just as good. We all get the same. We have the same phone. All right. Good luck, everyone. Thank you, Sherry.
Great. Thank
Bye.
you. All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Morning.
Can we have everybody turn on their video? All right. Great. So before we get started, who are the scoring panelists? Are they on video here? Can I just raise your hands? 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. So before we get started, each of the scoring panelists, seeing everybody and having reviewed the rosters, is there anybody who has any reason to be biased in judging either team or have any kind of a conflict?
No.
Okay, terrific. So I don't know how much of this applies to virtual, but if there are video recorders present and being used, both teams have approved that. Are there any video recorders being used besides YouTube or Zoom? No, okay. So anybody who's in the gallery in the virtual courtroom who is connected with teams not competing in this round, being student members and coaches of other schools or the same school but a different team, anybody like that, at this time we would need you to leave the courtroom. I'm supposed to remind the teams that there won't be any recess unless there's an emergency. And any disputes arising out of the competition must be reported in accordance with the competition rules. Your compliance, the team's compliance with time requirements will be considered in the individual scoring. Is there any coach or team member who is not participating in this round in the courtroom besides a timekeeper? No, okay. All right, can we at this point then ask each team to introduce the participating team members, the attorneys and the witnesses?
Your Honor, would you like the prosecution to go first?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Elizabeth Kugler, and today I will be directing Alex Fuentes and crossing Taylor Perkins.
Thank you, Ms. Kugler. And for the defense?
Would you like all of the prosecution lawyers to continue?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there's more than, yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Sorry.
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Kasha Hires, and I will be directing Jordan Markowitz, crossing Avery Becker, and I will also be delivering the closing statements on behalf of the prosecution.
Thank you. Anybody else for the prosecution?
Good morning, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Miranda McCoy, and today I will be performing the direct examination of Kyle Cusack, the cross-examination of Blake Van Owen, as well as delivering opening statements on behalf of the prosecution. At this time, may our witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Matea Hires, and today I am Alex Fuentes.
Good morning. My name is Kai Salter, and today I am Detective Jordan Markowitz.
Good morning. My name is McKenna Selby, and I am Kyle Cusack.
Thank you. Anything else for the prosecution?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Could we have the defense?
Morning, Your Honor. Opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Senna Covey. I'm going to be delivering the opening statement, directing Avery Becker, and crossing Detective Jordan Markowitz.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is JP Corain, and I'll be performing the direct examination of Taylor Perkins and the cross-examination of Kyle Cusack.
Thank
Good morning,
you.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Cameron Saros, and I will be delivering the closing statement, delivering the and conducting the direct examination of Blake Van Owen and the cross-examination of Alex Fuentes. At this time, may our witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Thank
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Haley Weintraub, and I'm Avery Becker.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the council and members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Ashlyn, and I am Taylor Perkins.
Good morning, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Kayla Corain, and I am Blake Van Owen.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we're going to swear in the team members, the gallery, scoring panelists, and the witnesses. Oh, for virtual competition, all witnesses are deemed sworn. So we don't have to go through all of that. Okay. All right. Are the parties ready to proceed?
Prosecution is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
The defense is ready to proceed as well, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Prosecution, you may call your first witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution actually does have a few pretrial motions.
Okay. Go ahead.
The prosecution requests that due to the virtual setting, lawyers may remain sitting for direct and cross examinations.
That's fine.
We also request that any time remaining for closing statements may be reserved for a rebuttal close.
Yes, that's acceptable.
And then on sustained objections, would you like us to request that the testimony may be stricken from the record, or should we assume that the testimony has already been stricken?
If you'd like the testimony to be stricken, you can request that.
And then finally, we would like to establish a means for presenting evidence. Given the virtual setting, we request that during the admission of evidence, the witnesses be allowed to look at the case materials that they already have in front of them, provided in order to identify the exhibits for admission. And then once they are identified and admitted, with the court's permission, my co-counsel will then publish the exhibit to the jury through screen sharing.
That sounds fine.
Okay, the prosecution has no further preliminary matters.
Thank you. Any preliminary matters from the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense asks that all stipulated facts be admitted into evidence.
They will be admitted?
No further preliminary matters, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right. Prosecution, are you ready to proceed with your first witness?
We do have an opening statement, Your Honor.
I'm sorry. Yes, opening statements.
Thank you.
From the prosecution, thank you. And do we have, who's the timekeeper?
I am, Your Honor. My name is
Okay.
Dee Balaji.
All right. And Ms. Balaji, are you going to be holding something up so we know where time stands?
No, but I will be putting times in the chat if that is okay.
In the chat, okay.
Your Honor, my name is Kendrick Chen, and I'm the other timekeeper, and I'll be doing the exact same thing of putting the times in the chat.
Okay, terrific. We can all keep track of it there. Thank you. All right, opening statement for the prosecution.
Yes, Your Honor. And for purposes of clarification, can you see and hear me all right?
Yes, I can see you and hear you okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
May it please the court, counsel, members of the jury. We're here today because of tragic arrogance, which led to a tragic choice, which led to tragic consequences. The Colorado high school community mourns the loss of their mock trial coach, Mackenzie Brackman. But the defendant, Avery Becker, a former student and mock trial member at Colorado High School, is not grieving. Why not? Because Avery Becker killed Mackenzie Brackman, ending the feud that had been building between them since the day that they met. Now, how do we know that Avery Becker and Mackenzie Brackman weren't on good terms with each other? Well, let's take a look back at their time together on the mock trial team. Avery constantly showed up late to practice. Avery was never prepared. Avery didn't listen to her coach's advice. We know that their relationship was strained because one day after mock trial practice, Avery decided to vandalize Mr. Brackman's car. As a result, she was kicked off the mock trial team. Now, this could have been the end of the story had Avery accepted the consequences of her actions. Instead, she made a plan to get back at Mr. Brackman. On March 6, 2020, she traveled to Mr. Brackman's house with the intent to break in and vandalize it, as she'd done before to his car. However, Mr. Brackman was home during the time of the intrusion. Alerted to the break-in by his Ring Door app, he grabbed a knife in self-defense. Avery seized control of the knife, stabbed Mr. Brackman just below his shoulder blade, and ran out the front door, leaving him to die on the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, how do we know that Avery Becker was the one who broke into Mackenzie Brackman's house? How do we know that she planned to vandalize it? Well, all we have to do is look at the evidence. Today, you will hear from Alex Cifuentes, a student at Colorado High School who was on the mock trial team with the defendant. Alex will testify that she received texts from the defendant indicating that she planned to break into Mackenzie Brackman's house and vandalize it. And what happens after Alex receives these texts? Surely enough, an intruder breaks into Mackenzie Brackman's house. Now, the defense is going to say they're going to try and spin this story into one of ambiguity and discredit the investigative work of the police. But today, you'll hear from Detective Jordan Markowitz, one of the first people to arrive at the scene. When he arrives at the scene, what does he find? The dead body of Mackenzie Brackman sprawled on the floor with a stab wound in his shoulder and a bloody knife lying beside him. Detective Markowitz begins to look for suspects, and when he learns of the texts that the defendant sent to Alex Cifuentes, he follows that lead. But what happens when Detective Markowitz gets a search warrant for Avery Becker's phone? Well, Avery claims to have lost her phone the day before the murder. But Detective Markowitz doesn't let this deter him. Today, you will hear him explain to you what he discovered in his investigation, including cell tower records that indicate that the defendant was traveling to Mackenzie Brackman's house just before the murder. The defense is going to say that Avery Becker did not commit these crimes. But today you will also hear from expert witness Kyle Cusack, a certified crime scene reconstruction investigator, who will tell you that this is simply not the case. She reconstructed this crime, and the evidence at the scene pointed her to the conclusion that this murder was not premeditated. She concluded that this was clearly a planned burglary gone wrong. After reviewing the evidence, she concluded that the murder weapon was taken from within Mackenzie Brackman's own home. Ladies and gentlemen, we acknowledge as the prosecution that we bear the burden of proving the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and today we will do just that. At the end of this trial, once you have heard all the evidence, we will ask you to find the defendant guilty of all charges, because tragic arrogance led her to make a tragic choice, murdering an innocent man, and tragically, that choice must have a consequence: the conviction of Avery Becker for the murder of Mackenzie Brackman. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. An opening statement for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Missing suspect, missing evidence, missing motive. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, a case that is based on assumptions and missing evidence is not one that can lead to a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution failed to consider the holes in their case that point to other directions. Missing motive. Avery Becker is a former Colorado High School student and successful mock trial team member. There were times in which she disagreed with her coach, Mackenzie Brackman, one of which resulted in her vandalizing her coach's car, an action that she later regretted. She wanted nothing more than to apologize to her coach, but she never got the chance to do so. On March 6, 2020, Mackenzie Brackman, the Colorado High School mock trial team's coach, was found dead, stabbed in the doorway of his home. He had been stabbed by an unknown intruder. The prosecution will tell you that Avery killed Coach Brackman after going to his home with the intent to vandalize it. They will first point to the Ring home security videos that show a masked and gloved intruder. They will then point to cell phone records showing Avery's phone in the vicinity of Mackenzie Brackman's home at the time leading up to and around the murder. Finally, they will point to screenshots of text messages supposedly sent to Avery Becker's teammate, Alex Fuentes, stating intent to vandalize the coach's home. Missing evidence. The evidence that we will present today will show that Avery spent the day of March 6th with her friend, Taylor Perkins, looking for her missing phone. Missing suspect. The prosecution built a case off of videos that do not even show the intruder's face, text messages that were sent into the police department through screenshots from Avery's jealous teammate, and a crime scene reconstruction that jumps to conclusions. Today, you will hear from Avery Becker, who will testify to the events leading up to and on the day of March 6th. You will also hear from Taylor Perkins, Avery's friend, who will testify to Avery's whereabouts and relationships. Then you will hear from Blake Van Owen, who will bring to light the aspects of the investigation that were overlooked initially. Members of the jury, the prosecution has the burden of proof in this court today. They must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker broke into Mackenzie Brackman's home on March 6th with the intent to commit a crime and left having committed first-degree murder. This requires for you to not have any reasonable doubt that this crime was committed. The evidence that the prosecution will present today will not overcome this high burden. There is a missing suspect, missing evidence, and missing motive. Therefore, you must rule that Avery Becker is not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. Prosecution may call its first witness.
Your Honor, the prosecution calls Ms. Alex Fuentes to the stand.
Thank you, Ms. Fuentes. I'll remind you that you're under oath and have been sworn already in this matter.
Good morning, Ms. Fuentes. Could you please state your name and spell it for the court?
Yes, my name is Alex Fuentes, and that's spelled Alexsifuentes.
I want to begin by talking about the mock trial team you were part of and the relationship between the defendant in this case.
Objection, foundation.
Ms. Kugler, your response?
I can lay some foundation for that, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Ms. Fuentes, when you were in high school, did you participate in any after-school activities?
Yes, I was actually a part of the mock trial team.
And who was on that team with you?
There were a lot of us, but the defendant, Avery Becker, was on that team with me.
And who was your coach?
Mackenzie Brackman.
Now, I'd like to talk about this mock trial team you are a part of and the relationship between Avery Becker, who you just mentioned, and Mackenzie Brackman. What was your relationship like with the defendant, Avery Becker?
Avery and I have always been pretty good friends. She actually convinced me to join the mock trial team when I was a freshman.
Given your personal experience, how is Mr. Brackman and Avery's relationship on the team?
Avery always played the victim.
Objection, question calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Now,
Ms. Kugler, if you'd like to lay some additional foundation, the question may be allowed, but at this point, I would consider it speculation.
Your Honor, could counsel please explain what foundation they believe is lacking?
Yes, I simply believe that we have not laid enough foundation to remove any doubt that Cifuentes would have an accurate idea of Avery and Brackman's relationship.
Ms. Cifuentes may testify to that relationship if there's foundation established that she has sufficient experience in observing it.
Your Honor, in this case, we've already established that Cifuentes and Avery Becker were good friends on this team, so therefore she can testify as to her rational perception of the situation.
Is that a stipulated fact?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, then I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Given your personal experience, how is Mr. Brackman and Avery's relationship on the team?
think Avery always played the victim but didn't really work hard, and I think that they were both pretty frustrated with each other.
What was the result of that mutual frustration?
Mr. Brockman was always telling Avery to do a better job of preparing for practice and tournaments, but Avery simply refused. The tension between them just got out of hand.
Was there a specific moment you felt embodied that?
I think that it reached a boiling point after Avery came late to practice for like the millionth time. And after that practice, Mr. Brockman rightfully demoted Avery to the B team.
I want to talk about the events that led to Avery being kicked off the mock trial team. What did Avery do after being demoted?
Well, she somehow convinced Taylor Perkins, who's Avery's like second best friend, to quit the team, and Brockman had to let Avery back on the A team after that.
What happened concerning the mock trial team after Avery got back on?
We went to regionals and Avery won Best Attorney and Best Closing Award.
And how did Mr. Brockman react to that?
Mr. Brockman tried to explain to Avery that even though she won those awards, Avery shouldn't confuse good showmanship with good lawyering. And he told Avery that what she did would be considered malpractice in the real world.
What did Avery do after Mr. Brockman tried to talk to her?
Avery vandalized Mr. Brockman's beautiful vintage 1986 Porsche 911 with a permanent marker, writing Worst Attorney Award on the hood. And after that, Mr. Brockman kicked Avery off the team for good.
Now, I want to turn to how Avery Becker responded to being kicked off the team. What, if any, contact did you have with Avery after Mr. Brockman kicked her out?
Avery actually texted me and asked for help getting back on the team.
And how did you respond to that request?
I did think that the team was better off without Avery, but I agreed to try and convince Mr. Brockman to let Avery back on the team on Avery's behalf. But he was just not interested. It was more than just the Porsche incident. It had been everything that had been going on for the past 4 years.
I'd like to discuss your experiences regarding the investigation of this murder. Who, if anyone, contacted you regarding the murder?
I talked to Detective Markowitz at the Denver Police Department about the text message that I exchanged with Avery, and he wanted a full interview.
What text messages are you referring to?
Avery texted me asking for help getting back on the team.
This text conversation has been marked as Exhibit 14. Do you have a copy of Exhibit 14 in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Do you recognize this?
Yes.
What is it?
These are the text messages I exchanged with Avery.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of those text messages?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to admit Exhibit 14 as evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. Objection, authenticity.
Your Honor, may I respond to that?
Yes, please, Ms. Kugler.
Under Rule 901B, the witness has knowledge that this item is what it claims to be, and this is sufficient to satisfy the requirement of authenticating or identifying an item of evidence.
Your Honor, permission to respond?
Yes, go ahead.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 1003, this duplicate of these text messages would not be admissible due to the fact that there is genuine question raised as to the authenticity of the original text messages.
At this point, I haven't heard any genuine questions, so I'm going to admit the evidence subject to cross-examination.
Permission to publish Exhibit 14 to the jury.
You may.
Now, Ms. Cifuentes, are these the original text messages directly printed from your phone?
Well, no, this is actually a printout of the screenshots that I emailed to the detective.
Why didn't you provide the detective with the originals?
When my dad yelled that it was time to go for the interview, I completely forgot that my phone was charging and I accidentally left it at home.
What happened once the detective realized that you did not have the original texts?
We offered to come back with the phone after the interview, but the detective told us that it was okay and just asked me to send screenshots of the text instead.
Will you please read the final 2 texts from Avery Becker?
Yes, it says, "I'm gonna wait until he's at work, then break in and trash it. That'll show him."
What was your reaction to those texts?
I was worried. Based on those texts, I thought that Avery planned to go to Mr. Brackman's house while Mr. Brackman was at work and trash the place.
I want to address some issues about the defense's investigation into the case. Did you speak to anyone
Objection,
investigating?
improper opinion from a lay witness. I don't believe that this witness is. qualified to testify as to the investigation of the defense?
Sorry, Ms. Kugler, would you please repeat the question?
I would like to address some issues about the defense's investigation into the case. Did you speak to anyone investigating the case other than Detective Markowitz?
I'm going to allow this line of questioning subject to sufficient foundation.
Would you like me to re-ask the question, Ms. Fuentes?
No, it's okay. Yes, I talked to a PI for the defense. I told her that I had no interest in talking to her, but she persisted in asking me a few questions.
Can you describe what happened during that conversation?
I learned that I was basically being accused of faking the text messages from Avery. I would never even consider creating a fake text exchange.
Was there anything else the defense informed you of?
They also accused me of stealing Avery's
Objection
phone.
hearsay.
Ms. Kugler?
Your Honor, this is not being offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. Rather, it is being offered to prove the effect on the listener.
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
Was there anything else the defense informed you of?
They accused me of stealing Avery's phone and giving it to some kid named Blair Rollins, who I learned may have been involved in the case.
Did you know Blair Rollins at all?
Knew him, but I didn't really have any meaningful relationship with him. I barely knew each other well enough to say hello and goodbye when we crossed paths in the hall.
How would you like to respond to the accusation of stealing Avery's phone?
I certainly would not have stolen Avery's phone for Blair Rollins.
Finally, I'd like to further address your friendship with Avery Becker. Did you consider you and Avery to be rivals at all?
No, I wholeheartedly disagree with that. Avery and I weren't rivals in mock trial. We were teammates and we were friends. Avery and I liked each other very much, which is why Avery texted me to help get back on the team.
And lastly, how has this tragedy affected your perspective of this case?
Mr. Brackman was a great coach, and this whole experience has been devastating for me. I never really thought before about how things happening in trials affect people, but this is real. Coach Brackman is dead.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Saros. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Fuentes.
Good morning.
Let's begin with your relationship with Avery Becker. You had your frustrations with Avery?
Yes, like all friends, we had frustrations with each other, but we were still friends despite it.
And you believe that you worked harder than her?
Yes, I would say that because I felt like I always prepared for everything beforehand and she just made it up on the fly.
And you believe that the team was better off without Avery?
Yes, like I said before, she always made everything up on the fly and it really just threw our whole team off.
You were excited about the larger role that you would have with Avery off the team?
Sure.
Moving on to your interview at the police station, you didn't have your phone with you when you went to the police station to be questioned?
No, the battery on my phone was starting to go bad, so I couldn't go anywhere without charging it. And so I was charging it to make sure that it wouldn't die before the interview, and then I completely forgot that it was charging.
And you sent only screenshots of the text conversation between you and Ms. Becker?
Yes.
And you didn't show your phone to the detective? Excuse me, you didn't show your phone to the detective?
No, like I said, it was charging, so I forgot to bring it to the interview.
And you don't have that phone anymore?
No, I traded it in.
And no way to access the information on it?
I guess not.
Finally, let's discuss your interaction with Avery at the Fry Shack. You played a game on Avery's phone while you were at the Fry Shack?
Yeah, I think that's a testament to how good of friends we were. Like, she let me play games on her phone.
And you had her phone to play this game right before she left?
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect, Ms. Kugler?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Fuentes. Prosecution may call their next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Detective Jordan Markowitz to the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Markowitz, I'll remind you, you're under oath and have been sworn in this matter. Go ahead, Ms. Hires. Hires, is it pronounced?
Yes, it's pronounced Hires.
Thank you.
Good morning, Detective Markowitz. Can you please state your name and spell it for the court?
Jordan Markowitz, JordanMarkowitz.
Thank you. I'd like to begin with your background and experience in homicide investigation. What is your profession?
I work as a homicide detective with the Denver Police Department, and I have a specialized experience in training with cell phones.
And how long have you done this?
I've been with DPD for about 13 years, and I've been a detective for 7.
I'd like to turn back to the specialized training you mentioned. Can you please elaborate on that?
Yes, I have a cell phone technology and forensic data recovery certification from the American Academy of Law Enforcement. To get this certification, I had to complete a 3-day training course and pass the certification exam.
And what exactly did you learn in this course?
I learned about the different types of cell detail records that can be obtained, how to obtain and interpret cell tower data, and how to obtain and interpret cell phone forensic data.
And in how many cases have you used this certification?
I've used this certification in over 50 cases.
And what is your relation to the case today?
I was assigned to investigate the death of Mackenzie Brackman in March of 2020.
Your Honor, I'd now like to move to admit Detective Markowitz as an expert in homicide investigation, as well as cell phone technology and forensic data recovery.
Any objection, Ms. Covey?
May I voir dire, Your Honor?
You may.
Good morning, Detective Markowitz.
Good morning.
You have a cell phone technology and forensic recovery certificate.
Yes, I do.
And to get the certificate, you completed a 3-day training course.
Yes, I completed the standard training course and certification exam.
I have no objections to the qualifications of Detective Markowitz, Your Honor.
Thank you. The witness will be recognized as an expert as indicated by the prosecution. You may proceed, Ms. Ayers.
Thank you. I'd now like to move to the movements of Avery Becker on the day of the murder. What steps did you take to track Avery Becker on March 6th?
I obtained a warrant to search Becker's phone, which I was unable to search, and I obtained a court order to obtain cell detail records for Becker's phone.
And why were you unable to search Becker's phone directly?
When I contacted Becker's lawyer, I found she claimed that Becker had lost the phone on March 5th.
You mentioned that you obtained cell detail records from Becker's phone. Could you please provide a little bit of background on how those work?
Yes, so even when a phone's not in use, it's constantly reaching out to connect to a cell tower. And the service provider doesn't record all of this, but it will record a few important moments, like when calls are placed or when texts are made. And the most important detail that's recorded is the cell tower that the phone is communicating with.
How do cell phones determine which cell tower they communicate with?
There's a complex algorithm to determine which cell tower has the best connection, but it's almost always going to be the closest tower to the phone.
Are there ever instances when the cell phone does not connect to the closest tower?
Yes, for example, in a very busy area, it might connect to a farther tower, but it's almost always going to be the closest tower that will be connected to the phone.
And what did the cell detail records from March 6th obtain from Miss Becker's phone show?
There was another phone placing calls and sending texts to Becker's phone. I later found out that these texts and calls came from another student, Taylor Perkins.
And what else did you observe about the call detail records?
All activity from the phone ended on March 6th, meaning the phone was either turned off or destroyed.
Thank you. I'd now like to turn your attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 16. Do you recognize this exhibit? I'm sorry. Do you have this exhibit in front of you?
Yes, I do.
And do you recognize this?
Yes, this is a diagram I made that summarizes the cell detail records I obtained for Avery Becker's phone.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of the diagram that you made?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd like to admit Exhibit 16 into evidence.
Any objection, Ms. Covey?
Objection. Oh, never mind. No objection, Your Honor.
Okay. It'll be admitted?
Permission for my co-counsel to publish to the jury?
Yes, he may do that.
What exactly is shown by this diagram?
So this at 12:47, Becker received a text and the communication was consistent with the cell tower that covers Becker's home. Then at 12:55, Becker's received another text and the communication was consistent with Becker's phone traveling along Rock Creek Parkway. The blue dotted line on the diagram shows the most likely path that Becker's phone took on March 6th, based on these cell detail records.
Now, before we heard testimony from Alex Cifuentes about a text conversation with Avery Becker, I'd now like to turn your attention to what has been previously admitted as Exhibit 14. How did you obtain these text messages?
So during the investigation, I spoke to a student named Alex Cifuentes, who said that another student had texted her about plans to break into Brackman's house and trash it. I called Alex in for an interview and found out that this other student was Avery Becker.
And what were the contents of these text messages?
Avery sent a text to Alex and said, "I'm going to wait until he's at work, then break in and trash it," referring to Brackman's house.
And why were you unable to retrieve these texts during your initial interview with Miss Cifuentes?
Alex Cifuentes had forgotten to bring their phone with them to the initial interview, so I asked her to send screenshots the following day, which she did.
And is Exhibit 14 an accurate copy of those screenshots?
Yes, it is.
I'd now like to talk about what you found when you arrived at the scene of the crime on March 6th. What did you observe when you first arrived at the crime scene?
So I responded at approximately 14:20 hours, and when I first arrived at the home, I noticed that the front door was slightly open and that there was a body just inside the residence.
What did you find when you investigated the rest of the property?
I noticed that the back gate was unlatched and that the back door was open. I entered the residence through the back door and found the house in a state of disarray. There was a broken plate on the floor and there were scuff marks, signs of a struggle. In addition, there was a kitchen drawer open filled with large knives, and on the counter there was a large knife block with a large knife missing from it.
What, if anything, did you notice outside of the house?
I noticed that the house was equipped with a Ring doorbell and that there were Ring cameras on the south side of the home. The cameras covered the back gate and the back door.
And did you receive these Ring records?
Yes, I obtained account information and passwords for Brackman's Ring, and I was able to download all the videos captured on March 6th.
I'd now like to turn your attention to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 12. Do you have this exhibit in front of you?
Yes, I do.
And do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, this is one of the videos that was captured by Brackman's Ring on March 6th.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the video you recovered from Brackman's Ring?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd now like to move to admit Exhibit 12 into evidence. You're muted, Your Honor.
Thank you. My space bar wasn't working. Any objection to Exhibit 12?
No objections, Your Honor.
12 will be admitted.
Permission for my co-counsel to publish to the jury.
Permission is granted.
Detective Markowitz, can you please briefly describe this video?
Yes, this video shows an intruder wearing a mask and hoodie breaking into Brackman's house.
And can you please describe what this shows about what happened on March 6th, 2020?
Yes, this shows that Mackenzie Brackman had interrupted a break-in before he was killed. In addition, the height and build of the intruder in the video matches that of the defendant today, Avery Becker.
In your expert opinion, based on past homicides you have investigated, what do you believe happened on March 6th, 2020?
In my expert opinion, it is fairly obvious that Mackenzie Brackman interrupted a break-in, grabbed a large knife from his kitchen to defend himself, and then a struggle ensued with the intruder. During the struggle, the intruder got control of the knife and stabbed Brackman. He then ran to the front door where he collapsed, running either away from or after the intruder.
And in your expert opinion, based on all of the evidence you reviewed for this case, who traveled to Mackenzie Brackman's home on March 6, 2020?
In my expert opinion, based on Ring video evidence, cell detail records, text message evidence, and interviews with relevant witnesses, I believe that it is absolutely clear that Avery Becker traveled to Mackenzie Brackman's house with the intent to break in and vandalize it, and then killed Mackenzie Brackman.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Ms. Covey?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning again, Detective Markowitz.
Good morning.
I would first like to talk to you about the ring security footage that you obtained. You observed ring security footage from Mackenzie Brackman's home, correct?
Yes, I did.
This security footage shows a person wearing a hoodie, mask, and gloves.
Yes, it does.
All right, I would now like to discuss the text messages that Alex Cifuentes sent to you. You interviewed Alex Cifuentes during the investigation.
Yes, I did.
Alex Cifuentes had received text messages from Avery Becker.
Yes.
You asked for Alex Cifuentes' phone to view these texts.
Yes, I did ask for the phone.
They didn't have their phone with them.
No, but I asked for screenshots, which she did send.
So you acquired the text messages from Alex Cifuentes through screenshots.
Yes, I did.
So you never saw the text messages physically on the phone?
No, I did not.
Okay, I will now be moving on to the cell tower records from the day of the murder. You received cell tower records of Avery Becker's phone from the day of the murder.
Yes.
The records show that the phone had received several text messages and phone calls that day.
Yes.
These calls and text messages were all from Taylor Perkins.
Yes, they were.
Were any of the texts or calls made to Avery Becker's phone responded to?
No, they were not. I think it would be hard to respond to texts and calls while you were committing a crime.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect, Ms. Hires?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, Detective Markowitz. Prosecution may call their next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Kyle Cusack to the stand. Good morning, Ms. Cusack. Could you start by stating your name and spelling it for the court?
Kyle Cusack, Kylekuzak.
Thank you. I'd like to start by talking about your career. What do you do for a living?
I am a Colorado Bureau of Investigation certified crime scene reconstruction investigator, also known as a CSR.
Where do you work?
I am a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department.
And how long have you worked there?
I have spent the last 3 years of my tenure there.
How long have you been working in crime scene reconstruction?
I have 19 years of experience investigating complex crimes.
What kinds of complex crimes?
Home invasions, burglaries, homicides, domestic violence, fatal accidents, and armed robberies.
And what is your relation to the case today?
I visited the scene of the homicide and reconstructed the crime. I also reviewed all of the police reports, photographs from the scene, and the 4 ring security camera videos.
Your Honor, at this time I move to admit Ms. Kyle Cusack as an expert in crime scene reconstruction and investigation.
Oh, Your Honor, I think you're muted.
Yes, thank you. Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd like to voir dire.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Ms. Cusack.
Good morning.
You're offering your opinions to the jury as a crime scene reconstruction investigator,
Yes, I am.
based in part on your review of the physical evidence, right?
Yes.
You agree that any crime scene reconstruction investigator should have adequate training to properly analyze and draw correct conclusions about any evidence they're looking over,
Yes, training is important to be a CSR.
and that your experience as a crime scene reconstruction investigator is sufficient to properly analyze the evidence in this case.
Yes, I have 19 years of experience investigating crimes like this.
But the truth is, you're not a certified forensic scientist, correct?
I'm not testifying as that. I'm testifying as a crime scene reconstruction investigator.
Right. And you don't have any medical training in the area of stab wounds.
No, I do not.
And you're not certified in blood splatter analysis.
That is correct. I'm certified in crime scene reconstruction, which includes blood splatter analysis.
You're not certified in forensic anthropology specifically related to identifying a person based on their perceived race, sex, and height.
I'm not testifying as an expert in that field, so no.
And you're not professionally certified in DNA or fingerprint analysis as it relates to this case.
That is correct.
And you're only a civilian employee of the Denver Police Department and not a police officer.
Yes, I'm not testifying as a police officer. I'm testifying as a CSR.
And you've only been working at the DPD for 3 years, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you're aware that Detective Jordan Markowitz has been working with the DPD as a homicide detective for 7 years, correct?
Yes, Detective Markowitz and I have worked together during my time at DPD.
And you believe that some of Van Owen's conclusions fall outside of your area of expertise.
Due to their experience as a police officer, some of their experience, yes. However, I'm much more qualified in the area of crime scene reconstruction.
Your Honor, I object to Ms. Cusack being certified as an expert witness in crime scene reconstruction on the grounds of a lack of experience, training, and certification with the analysis of fundamental evidence in this case.
Thank you. I'm going to have the witness recognized as an expert in crime scene reconstruction. Any concerns about that can be addressed in cross-examination. Thank you.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, you may proceed, Ms. McCoy.
Thank you. Ms. Cusack, I'd like to start by talking to you about your investigative process. How do you approach your CSR work?
I approach it in 5 parts. First is recognition and documentation, then collection of evidence, evaluation of evidence, hypothesis and testing, and finally, reconstruction.
How did you apply this 5-step process in this case?
I used a witness tracking spreadsheet to summarize information from witnesses and suspects. I also used a physical evidence tracking sheet to identify, document, and describe observations about the evidence.
What did you do next?
Next, I expanded the framework for evidence in order to document my analysis. This included cross-referencing items of evidence with information and images.
What kinds of images?
Photographs from the scene showed blood droplets between the kitchen and the front door, along with blood cast off on the wall and ceiling near the front door. This indicated a clear chronology that the victim was stabbed near the kitchen, then proceeded to the front door and removed the knife there.
What happened to these photographs?
It is my understanding that the digital files were partially corrupted and the photographs of the blood splatter and cast off were unrecoverable.
When did that occur?
Well after the time I had reviewed the photographs, I had no trouble accessing them for my analysis.
Now let's talk about the crime scene. What evidence did you find of a struggle?
I observed scuff marks and a broken plate.
Where did you observe these scuff marks?
They were on the kitchen floor near the back door.
And where did the intruder break into Mackenzie Brackman's house from?
The intruder entered through the back door, which is where I noticed those marks.
Where did you notice the broken plate?
Approximately 5 feet away from the front door.
I'd like to direct your attention to what has been previously marked as exhibits 9 and 18. Do you have a copy of those in front of you?
Yes, I do.
What are they?
Exhibit 9 is a photograph of the broken plate I observed at the scene, and Exhibit 18 is a photograph of the scuff marks I observed on the floor near the back door.
And are these a fair and accurate representation of the scuff marks and the broken plate?
Yes, they are.
Your Honor, at this time I move to admit exhibits 9 and 18 into evidence.
The objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
9 and 18 will be admitted.
Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to publish those exhibits to the jury.
That's fine. Go ahead.
Ms. Cusack, what do these scuff marks suggest?
The scuff marks indicate that there was a struggle of at least 2 individuals engaged in close contact near the back door.
And what does the broken plate suggest?
The plate indicates that that struggle moved from the back door to the kitchen table. The plate was likely knocked to the ground as the individuals struggled.
What other evidence did you notice in the kitchen?
I observed an open knife drawer.
What did you notice about the knife drawer?
The fact that it was open caught my attention. There was an array of different types of knives inside of it. The victim likely opened the drawer to search for a defensive weapon.
Now, let's turn our attention to the murder weapon. Where was it recovered?
just inside the front door.
What's this position consistent with?
This is consistent with the victim having been stabbed near the front door, then, being stabbed near the kitchen, then proceeding to the front door and removing the knife there.
Now, we've discussed a lot of evidence here. What did all these pieces of evidence lead you to conclude?
The evidence shows that the victim was alerted by the Ring security system to the intruder's presence before they even entered the home and armed himself with a knife to use for self-defense. The victim confronted the intruder, and while the two struggled, that struggle moved from the back door to the kitchen table when the plate was knocked to the ground. At some point, the intruder disarmed the victim, obtained the knife, and proceeded to stab the victim.
Now, let's talk about how your conclusions in this case differ from that of the defense. What conclusions did they draw?
The investigator for the defense, Blake Van Owen, suggests that the intruder snuck up behind the victim and stabbed him while he was seated at the kitchen table.
What is your opinion of that idea?
I disagree with it strongly. This would have required the victim to have been surprised by the intruder.
And why do you think that's an unlikely scenario?
First, the victim would have known about the intruder's presence due to the notifications from the Ring app. Second, they would have heard the back door slide open and the intruder walk across the kitchen. And third, in order for Van Owen's theory to be accurate, the intruder would have been holding the knife in a backwards position, which is highly unusual.
Ms. Cusack, what else does this theory fail to consider?
Van Owen's theory fails to consider the scuff marks on the floor, the broken plate, or the open knife drawer.
How do you know Blake Van Owen?
I've seen them at CSR conferences. They were a police officer for a short time, but they were never a CSR.
Then how is her work connected to yours?
Van Owen simply reviews the work of actual CSRs, mostly by reading our reports and trying to find ways to reinterpret the evidence that we discuss.
And how accurate is that process?
Reading a report will never provide a person with the same degree of understanding as physically being at the scene of a crime and examining the evidence directly.
Finally, I'd like to focus on what you concluded from this case. In your expert opinion, what conclusions do you draw about the circumstances of Mr. Brackman's death?
This was clearly a planned burglary gone wrong. The intruder had knowledge of the victim's property and likely chose a time of day that the victim's pattern would have placed him outside the home. However, the victim was home at the time and was killed by the intruder.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions at this time.
Mr. Corain, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning again, Ms. Kuzak. Let's begin with your analysis of the crime scene. You used photographs of the blood droplets and cast off to determine the chronology of the events in this crime.
Yes, I did.
And the digital files for the photographs that you used became corrupted and lost at some point after your review.
Unfortunately, that's correct.
And to your knowledge, the file corruption occurred after review. The files are now inaccessible.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
To your knowledge, the file corruption occurred after your review, and the files are now inaccessible.
That's correct.
You used scuff marks to support your theory that there wasn't a surprise attack by the intruder.
They were one piece of evidence I used to come to that conclusion, yes.
So you used it to support your theory.
I did use them, yes.
But you can't carbon date scuff marks to see how old they are.
Due to their location by the back door, which is where the intruder entered, I confirmed—
That's not what I'm asking. You can't carbon date scuff marks to see how old they are?
No, you cannot.
And there are no before and after pictures of the scuff marks.
Not to my knowledge, no.
And you've assumed that the scuff marks were made during the murder?
Yes, that was the conclusion I came to.
Moving on to the murder weapon, you theorized that the Ring app alerted Mr. Brackman to the intruder, and he grabbed a knife from the knife block to defend himself.
That's correct.
The murder weapon is an entirely different brand of knife from the ones in the knife block.
Yes, it is.
You called this a straightforward home invasion crime?
Yes, it was relatively easy for me to reconstruct.
But you said you would prefer if you had more physical evidence.
Yes, however, that is the case in all crime scenes.
But you weren't able to recreate all event segments or place all evidence in your investigation.
Yes, again, that is the case in all crime scenes.
You aren't able to recreate all event segments or place all the evidence in all crime scenes?
Unfortunately not. However, I had enough information and evidence to come to an accurate conclusion.
You've never had a crime scene where you were able to place all of the evidence?
Yes, like I said, that's unfortunately the case with most crimes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anything further, Ms. McCoy?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay. Witness is excused. Prosecution have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor. This time the prosecution rests.
Thank you. And the defense, are you ready to proceed with your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Avery Becker to the stand. Good morning, Miss Avery Becker. Can you please state your full name and spell your last for the jury?
My name is Avery Becker, Becker.
Do you know why you were here today?
Unfortunately, I'm being wrongfully accused of killing my coach.
Are you a student?
I was a senior last year at Colorado High School.
Were there any activities that you participated in at Colorado High School?
One thing I really loved to do was mock trial. I did it with a bunch of my friends at all 4 years of high school.
Did you have any specific friends that you got along really well with in mock trial?
My best friend was on the team. Her name is Taylor Perkins.
What was your relationship with Mackenzie Brackman?
Mr. Brackman was my coach. We had a bit of a rocky relationship, but I respected him a ton, and I wish I appreciated him more.
Why did you not get along?
He always told me I should have worked harder. We disagreed on some mock trial things just inside of the club.
I would now like to talk about the time leading up to regionals. Did anything out of the ordinary happen in the time leading up to the regional tournament?
About a month before the tournament, Mr. Brackman moved me down to the B team.
Did you try to get back onto the A team at all?
I really tried to talk with him to get back on the A team, but he just wouldn't let me.
How did your friend Taylor respond to you being moved to a different team?
Taylor didn't care too much about mock trial, so she offered to quit the team to put me back up to A team.
Did you get put back onto the A team after Taylor quit?
I did, yes.
How did the regional tournament go?
Regionals went really well. Our team did super well. We advanced to state, and I won Best Attorney Award.
I'm going to move on to the time after regionals. Where were you the Tuesday night after regionals?
After regionals, we had a practice to go over what we did well and what we could have worked on for the tournament.
What did you do specifically to go over what you did well and didn't do well?
Personally, I was at the board and I had a marker in hand and I was about to write down to start the discussion.
What happened after you started writing down everything on the board?
Mr. Brockman came in and we started arguing again. Back again to the same old arguments we always had, so I just left.
What happened after you left the meeting?
After I left, I still had the marker in hand, and when I left the building, I was faced with his car that, in a moment of pure stupidity, and I was just distraught, I wrote on his car, and it's one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made.
What happened after you wrote on his car?
I was just looking at his car, thinking about what I did when he came out, and he started yelling at me again.
How did he respond to seeing his car like that?
He actually tried to invite me back into practice, but then he saw the car and he kicked me off the team entirely. That was it.
What did you do after getting kicked off of the team?
All I could do was go straight home and cry to my mom about it. It was horrible.
What happened the next day?
I really felt like I needed to apologize to him. I was going to tell him that I would get a summer job or clean his car or do anything I could to make it better, but he didn't even want to talk to me. I went to his office and his secretary wouldn't let me in.
Did you ever get to apologize to him face to face?
No, I I never got to apologize because he got murdered.
I'm really sorry. If it's okay with you, I would now like to talk to you about the day before March 6th.
Of course.
Where were you the day before the murder?
I was with my best friend Taylor at the local fry shack.
Did you see anyone familiar at the fry shack?
Usually mock trial students go there a lot, so I think I saw Alex Cifuentes.
What was your relationship with Alex Cifuentes like?
Honestly, Alex and I never really got along and we didn't know each other that well.
What did you do at the fry shack?
I was just there with Taylor. We just played on my phone and then went to walk around the mall for a while. I love hanging out with her.
What else did you do that day? Oh, sorry. I'll move on. I would like to discuss the day of the murder, March 6th. Now, what happened on the morning of March 6th?
When I woke up, I had a weird feeling in the back of my mind that I didn't have my phone. But when I went to pick up Taylor for our carpool, she also noticed because I hadn't texted her.
What did you do when you couldn't find your phone?
Taylor and I decided that since we both had our first periods off and we didn't have much schoolwork to do that day, that we would just skip to try to find it.
Did you ever text Alex Cifuentes that day?
As I said, Alex and I aren't close at all. I would have no reason to, and I did not know.
All right, I'm going to move on and just briefly talk about an individual named Blair Rollins. Who is Blair Rollins?
Blair Rollins is another mock trial student. I also don't know her very well, but she's pretty tight with Alex, I think.
Are there any similarities between you and Blair?
Honestly, Blair and I have pretty much the same build. You could confuse the two of us easily.
Objection, relevance?
Ms. Covey, your response?
Your Honor, I'm just trying to establish that there are other people who are the same stature as Avery Becker in the surrounding area.
Thank you. I'll allow it.
And finally, did you kill Coach Brackman?
Absolutely not. I could never even think of doing that to him. I respected him even if I didn't always show it, and I wish I appreciated him before he was gone.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Ayers, cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Ms. Becker.
Good morning.
We'd like to begin by talking about your time on the mock trial team, including your relationship with Coach Brackman. You have been on the mock trial team for 4 years?
Yes, I have.
And you used mock trial mainly as a way to hang out with your friend Taylor Perkins and text each other across the room?
That's why we started, but I ended up really enjoying the club.
And Brackman was often frustrated with you because you would text your friend during practice.
Unfortunately, yes, we disagreed on some things like that.
But you believed that Brackman was hard on you because he was jealous of your abilities as an attorney.
I said that a few times, but I don't really believe that. He was looking out for the team, and I should have as well.
And you two had a difference in opinions often.
Yeah, but all about the club.
And because of this, you two argued frequently during practice.
We argued about my work ethic was really it, but yeah.
I'd like to move on to talk about why you were kicked off the mock trial team. About a month before the regional tournament, Brackman got mad at you because you came to practice unprepared again.
Yes, that did happen.
So he moved you to the B team.
I did get moved down to the B team about a month before.
And you got your friend Taylor to quit so that Brackman would put you back on the A team.
Taylor and I are super tight, and I'm really thankful for her. She actually stepped down on her own. I didn't force her into anything.
But after Taylor quit, you were put back on the A team for regionals.
I was, yes.
And after regionals, when Coach Brackman attempted to give you some feedback on your performance, you refused to listen and stormed out of practice.
I was having a bit of a bad day, and I didn't want to argue with him anymore. So yeah, I just left.
And you took a permanent marker, a Sharpie, and wrote the words "Worst Attorney Award" on the hood of Coach Brackman's Porsche.
Unfortunately, yeah, that was one of the worst things I've ever done. And at the time, I really thought it was a dry erase. I wish I could make it better.
But it wasn't a dry erase marker, was it? It was a Sharpie.
It was not.
And so after he saw that, he kicked you off the team for good.
Yes.
And that devastated you.
I was upset that I wouldn't have it was my senior year, you know? I've been there for 4 years and I wouldn't have my final competition. So it just made me sad.
I'd like to move on to talk about your whereabouts on the day that Coach Brackman was murdered. The last place you claim to have seen your phone was the Fry Shack the day before the murder.
Yes.
So your story is that after the Fry Shack, you never once tried to use your phone to play games, to text your friend, to use social media until the morning of March 6th when you realized it was gone.
I was with Taylor the rest of the night. It didn't even cross my mind.
So that's a no. You never once tried to use your phone between the Friday and March 6th?
No, it didn't cross my mind because I was with Taylor all day.
And you stated that you don't really like Alex Cifuentes very much.
We don't get along that well, but I don't know her very well either.
But you let her play on your phone at the Fry Shack?
No, I did not. I did not talk to her at the Fry Shack. I was with Taylor.
Your statement today is that you did not talk to Alex Cifuentes at the Fry Shack.
I was with Taylor and Taylor only. As I said, I don't know Alex very well.
I would now like permission for my co-counsel to share Ms. Becker's statement, Ms. Becker's witness statement to the jury.
And what do you intend to use the statement for?
I would like to show that Avery Becker did say in her statement under oath that Alex did play on her phone at the Fry Shack.
Your response, Ms. Covey?
Your Honor, I believe I believe that Avery Becker did not mention meeting Alex. She herself didn't talk to Alex at any point at the Fry Shack.
I'm asking for your position regarding counsel's request to publish the witness's statement to the jury. Do you have a response?
I believe it's an improper impeachment, Your Honor.
Ms. Cyrus, I'm going to allow you to impeach the witness with the statement. If the impeachment is successful, we can revisit the issue of publishing that to the jury.
Okay, permission for my co-counsel to share the statement to the jury.
Okay, go ahead.
Can I direct you to line 139? You state that Alex must have taken your phone at the Fry Shack and then gave it to Blair.
I left my phone on the table when I went to the bathroom. I did not speak to Alex at the Fry Shack.
Thank you, Your Honor. My co-counsel can stop.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Ms. Hires. I'm not sure if something got in the way of your microphone, but.
I'll move on. You claim that you were with Taylor Perkins on March 6th.
I was, yes.
And you were in public places like the mall and the Fry Shack.
Yeah, that's where we went to look for my phone.
And you, but there's no one else here today to corroborate your claims except for your best friend.
I guess not, but I was with Taylor the whole day and she can say that.
Finally, you claim that you never sent these texts that Alex presented earlier today.
I did not.
But you did tell your mother that you would get back at Brackman even if it was the last thing you did.
I said that in a moment of just pure upsetness. I didn't mean it at all.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Anything further, Ms. Covey, for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor, a brief redirect.
Go ahead.
How did you do in the tournaments for mock trial?
I always did really well. It was a thing I really loved to do, even if I wasn't always the most prepared.
Did you ask Taylor to step down for you?
Taylor did it of her own accord. She really cares about me and didn't care about the team that much, so she stepped down on her own.
And finally, who were you with on March 5th, the entire day?
I was with Taylor Perkins.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. The defense can call their next witness.
The defense would like to call Taylor Perkins to the stand.
Okay. Ms. Perkins, I'll remind you you're under oath. You may proceed, Mr. Crane.
Good morning, Ms. Perkins.
Morning.
Could you please state your full name and spell your last for the jury?
Taylor Perkins, Perkins.
Thank you. I'd like to start with your education and relationship with Avery Becker. Where did you go to school?
I was a senior at Colorado High School last year.
Were there any activities you participated at in school?
I did mock trial with Avery.
How did you feel about participating in mock trial?
I kind of really just joined because I wanted to hang out with Avery.
How prepared was Avery at mock trial meetings?
She put in very little effort, but she always pulled through.
How did this affect Avery's performance at meetings?
Not at all. She did great.
Now, I'd like you to think back to the preparations before the regional tournament last year. Was Avery very prepared for the tournament?
About a month before, Avery was like the most unprepared I've ever seen. She was like obviously making things up on the fly, but she was a natural, really.
Was there any fallout to Avery's lack of preparation?
Our coach, Mr. Brackman, got really heated and he demoted Avery to the B team. And like when I heard about the demotion, I said that I bet A team would never win without Avery on the team. And it was Avery's senior year too. Like she put in the work and she had the award to prove it. Didn't seem fair to me.
Question, hearsay.
Your response, Mr. Crane?
I don't think any of what I heard was hearsay, Your Honor.
Ms. Kugler, do you want to specify what it is you believe is hearsay?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness has just testified that she said she bet that Avery would never win without being on the A team.
And what part of that is hearsay, in your opinion?
The fact that that is an out-of-court statement that she made.
Okay. Sustained.
Your Honor, I would move to strike the witness's testimony.
The testimony will be stricken. The jury will disregard it.
Did you do anything in response to Brackman's decision?
I stepped down from the team in support of Avery. And they had no choice but to put Avery on the A team.
After you left the team, did Avery continue doing mock trial?
Yeah, she Coach Brackman had no choice but to put her on the A team. And she won a bunch of awards. She did really good.
What did you do the Thursday after, excuse me. So did Avery continue doing mock trial?
No, she got kicked off the team after an argument with Coach Brackman.
What did you do the Thursday after Avery got kicked off of the team?
Avery tried to get back on the team during mock trial practice, but she was told to leave. So she went to my house. We played games on our phones.
What happened later that evening?
We went to grab something to eat at Fry Shack, and most of the mock trial team came in after practice when we were eating. And I think Alex Fentis made Avery mad, so she stormed off to the bathroom and left her phone on the table. And that thing was like Avery's third kidney, so leaving on the table must have meant she was really mad.
What happened next?
We headed out, and I don't remember if Avery grabbed her phone or not, and we hung out at the mall and then went home.
What happened the next morning on March 6th?
Avery picked me up at my house because she usually picks me up when we both have our first periods.
Did you coordinate with her when she picked you up?
I texted her, but she hadn't answered my text. So when she got to my car, we both realized that she lost her phone the night before. And then we went to look for her phone, and we checked at the Fry Shack.
Did anything unusual happen when you checked for her phone at the Fry Shack?
People from mock trial were there.
Was that surprising?
Yeah, they should have been at practice, and I guess Brackman never showed up that evening and he wasn't returning text, so they gave up and left.
What happened later that night?
I found out Brackman had been killed.
Let's talk about your relationship with Blair Rollins. Do you know Blair?
Yes, I do.
What do you think about him?
They're kind of weird, but they're good at what they did.
And as far as you're aware, was Blair Rollins at school on the day of the murder?
As far as I'm aware, Blair Rollins is not at school.
Did you go anywhere near Blair or near Brackman's house that day?
No, of course not.
And did anyone contact you requesting information about the location of your phone or where you went to verify your story?
No, they didn't.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Perkins, I'd like to start with your relationship with Avery Becker. Avery Becker was your best friend?
Yeah, she was everything to me.
And the only reason that you joined the mock trial team was because your friend did?
Yeah, I wanted to hang out with her.
You and Avery thought that Brackman was a mediocre coach, yes?
Yeah, but we respected him.
You described Avery's behavior as rash?
She could be rash at times, but, you know, isn't everyone?
And you thought that she had an inflated ego?
Sometimes, I guess.
But you were still good friends despite this?
Yeah, she's awesome.
So much so that a week before the mock trial regionals, you quit the team in support of Avery.
Yeah, mock trial doesn't really mean too much to me, but it means a lot to her, and I wanted to support her.
Let's talk about what you did once Avery was kicked off the team. You know that Avery was really upset and distraught after being kicked off the team.
Yeah, she really wanted to make it up to Coach Brackman.
But you weren't at the practice where Avery vandalized Mr. Brackman's car.
No, I wasn't.
You talked to Avery after the practice?
Yeah, she felt really bad about it.
But you didn't see any of what Avery said or did while in that emotional state?
No, I did not.
Now, are you aware that Avery has denied ever texting Alex Cifuentes for help getting back on the team?
Yes, I'm aware.
And you said in your statement that Avery did text everyone on the team, even Alex Cifuentes.
Yeah, she talked to me about how she wanted to text the team and ask them for help.
After Avery was kicked off the team, you went to the Fry Shack?
Yes, we did.
Where you then claim Avery lost her phone?
Yeah, I don't remember her taking her phone back with us that night.
But you also say that her phone was like a third kidney and it was never out of reach.
Well, she was really emotional that day. I think it would make sense if she lost it.
So your story is that your best friend, who you texted with all the time and played games with you on her phone, didn't notice that her phone was missing.
Objection, compound question.
Ms. Googler, could you break that down a little bit?
Yes, Your Honor. Did Avery text you all the time?
Yeah, that's why it was weird for me to not get text with her that morning.
You played games with her?
Yeah.
Objection, relevance.
Ms. Kugler, your response to the relevance objection?
Your Honor, this goes to show the relationship between the witness and the defendant and is a possible motive for bias.
I'll allow it. Go ahead.
You played games with her?
Yeah, we always hung out.
And Avery didn't notice that her phone was missing until a day later.
Yeah, she was just emotional that night, so we just went home.
And you were the one who pointed out that the phone was missing, not Avery.
Yeah, we were in the car and I realized she had answered in my text that day.
So we only have your word and the word of your best friend that the phone was lost at all.
Yeah, we were the only ones together.
I'd like to talk about your whereabouts on the day of the murder. You say you and Avery were together for the entire day looking for Avery's phone.
Yeah.
But you have no one who can support your story other than Avery?
Well, it was just us there, so yeah.
And you had technology available to you, like Find My Phone, that you could have used to find the missing phone?
Yeah, but we didn't know if it was off or not.
You didn't use it.
No, I did not.
And you and Avery discussed the murder of Mr. Brackman after the news broke.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Before Avery's lawyers contacted you about being a witness.
Yeah, before.
Finally, I'd like to talk about the defense's notion that Blair Rollins was somehow involved in this case. You claim that Blair Rollins, another student, might have committed the murder.
Yeah, we talked a tiny bit about it.
But you have no evidence or witnesses to support this theory.
Objection, improper lay opinion.
Your response, Ms. Kugler?
Your Honor, we're not asking about the expert opinion of this witness. We're simply asking about the witness's rational perception of their position in this case.
Overruled. You may answer.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, thank you.
You have no evidence or witnesses to support this theory.
No, we just speculated.
And the defendant, Avery Becker, was the one who suggested this theory to you.
Yeah, but it was both of us thinking it.
You say that Alex Fuentes was good friends with Rollins.
Yeah.
Objection, lack of foundation.
Your response, Ms. Kugler?
Your Honor, this is information pursuant to the witness's written statement.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Corain.
I don't think Alex Fuentes was ever brought up in the direct, so bring it up on cross is not relevant.
I'm going to overrule that. Ms. Kugler, you may proceed.
You say that Alex Fuentes was good friends with Rollins?
Yeah, I think they were.
Lastly, when Avery was in trouble before, you quit the team in order to help Avery.
Yeah, I wanted to support her. It's what she really cared about.
And now you're the only person who claims to have seen Avery during the time of the murder.
Yeah, I was with her.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect, Mr. Corain?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. The witness is excused. Any other witnesses for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor, the defense calls Professor Blake Van Owen to the stand. Before we begin, may I get a quick time check?
I think we just saw something that said, yeah, why don't we have the timekeepers post that? There we go.
Thank you. Good morning, Professor Van Owen.
Good morning.
Could you please state your full name and spell your last for the jury?
Blake Van Owen, Vanowen.
What's your profession?
I'm a private investigator and a college professor.
Where do you teach?
I teach at CU Denver.
And what subjects do you teach there?
I teach a course on police practices and social justice.
Could you elaborate further on your areas of teaching expertise?
Sure. In my course, we teach courses such as use of force, forensic evidence techniques, and police investigation tactics.
What experience do you have in the field of private investigation?
I've been a private investigator for over 5 years now, and in that time I've consulted on over 100 cases.
Have you testified in front of a court previously?
Yes, I avail myself regularly.
Could you elaborate further on how you avail yourself?
I've been an expert in crime scene reconstruction 8 times, cell tower analysis 5 times, and general police investigation tactics 12 times, and so on.
Do you have any other qualifications related to your specialty?
I have a master's degree in criminal justice.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, in light of Professor Blake Van Owen's education, experience, training, and specialized knowledge, I would like to offer Professor Blake Van Owen as an expert in crime scene reconstruction, cell tower analysis, general police investigation, and forensic evidence techniques.
Any objection, Ms. McCoy?
Yes, Your Honor. Prosecution would like to voir dire.
You may proceed.
Good morning, Professor. You were in law enforcement for less than a year.
I was.
So you didn't spend that much time observing police practices.
It's about a year.
But less than a year.
Yes, less than a year.
After that, you worked as a security guard.
I did.
And a school resource officer.
Yes.
But neither of those professions gave you direct expertise in police practices.
No, but I've been working as a private investigator for 5 years now.
You don't provide any information on how many times you've testified regarding forensic evidence techniques.
I do not.
And you have no formal training in that area.
I do not in forensic evidence techniques. I've been teaching a course at my college.
But not on forensic evidence techniques.
I've taught a course in forensic evidence techniques at CU Denver.
All right, you have no formal training in cell tower analysis?
I do not.
You have no formal training in crime scene reconstruction?
I do not.
No direct education in those areas specifically?
No.
Your Honor, the prosecution objects to this witness being admitted as an expert on the grounds that they lack the training, the education, and the specialized knowledge and skill to testify as an expert in those areas.
Your Honor, permission to respond?
You may respond, Ms. Saros.
Your Honor, a large portion of the opposing counsel's voir dire focused on police practices, which is not an area in which I'm trying to establish Blake Van Owen as an expert witness. Additionally, pursuant under Rule 702, Professor Blake Van Owen's experience could allow them to be an expert in these fields.
Thank you. I'm going to allow the witness and recognize the witness as an expert. Thank you.
Okay. Where did you begin your investigation of this incident?
I began by reviewing the police reports, the crime scene reconstruction done by Kyle Cusack, the cell tower reports, and the evidence done by Detective Markowitz.
And what was your initial perception of these documents?
It appeared as though the investigation was rushed. The prosecution's case left me in significant doubt, and there are many areas of the case that seemed to be overlooked.
What did you do next?
I conducted a partial investigation in the areas I believed were overlooked.
Did this change your perception of the initial investigation?
No, it made me even more doubtful.
What specific areas did you investigate?
I looked into the crime scene reconstruction, the phones, and potential other suspects.
Let's begin with the part of your investigation that focused on the crime scene. Where did you begin this part of your investigation?
I began by examining the crime scene photos.
Did anything in these images stand out to you?
I saw that there was little evidence of physical altercation.
Could you elaborate?
The only apparent evidence are of scuff marks on the floor, and there's no way to carbon date scuff marks. We don't know when these were made or if they were made during the incident.
Did you notice anything else?
The murder weapon was inconsistent with the style and blade dimensions of the knives and the otherwise orderly set of knives in the knife block.
Did this lead you to any conclusions?
There's the possibility that the murderer could have brought their own weapon to the crime scene, and the prosecution failed to consider this possibility.
Did you make any other observations about the knife?
I noticed that the handle of the knife was designed in a very specific way.
Could you elaborate?
Certain knives, including the one on the center of the case, have the handle designed so that the hand wraps around the knife in a specific way and the blade faces outwards.
What's the significance of this?
With the grip on this knife, the intruder would have had to stab at a downward angle.
In your expert opinion, what would this mean?
In my expert opinion, this means that for the intruder to stab Brackman at a downward angle and still nick his aorta, while they were both standing, the intruder would have had to have been much larger than Mr. Brackman.
Going back to your preparation for this case briefly, did you review all of the exhibits before us today?
I did.
And are you aware of Exhibit 10?
I am.
Could you describe what this exhibit is?
Exhibit 10 shows the perpetrator attempting to enter Mr. Brackman's home.
I'm now going to share my screen and play what has been previously marked as Exhibit 10. Do you recognize this video?
I do.
And have there been any noticeable changes made to it?
No.
Your Honor, I move to admit what has been previously marked as Exhibit 10 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
10 is admitted.
When you viewed that video, did you notice anything about the person in it?
I noticed that the person was of a smaller frame and wearing a hoodie, mask, and gloves.
What does this mean?
This means that The perpetrator couldn't have stabbed Mr. Brackman in the manner that they did if they were both standing.
In your expert opinion, what happened instead?
In my expert opinion, it makes more sense for Mr. Brackman to have been sitting with the intruder standing behind him.
Okay, perfect. And while we're on the topic of Ring doorbells, did anything else stand out to you about this part of the case?
As someone who has a Ring doorbell myself, I know that you can turn off push notifications. And since the complete user account records were never obtained for this case, we don't know if Mr. Brackman had his push notifications on and if he had seen those and gone to the door to greet the intruder.
What does this mean?
There's no suggestion from the evidence that Mr. Brackman would have seen a Ring notification, so he would have not gone to the door to meet the intruder.
Moving on to the cell tower records, where did you begin this part of your investigation?
I began by looking over the subpoena done by Detective Markowitz.
Based on your expertise, what does the cell tower data tell us about the incident?
At the very most, it tells us that Avery Becker's phone was somewhere near the house at the time of the incident. However, it doesn't tell us that Avery Becker was there.
Could you elaborate on why?
There's evidence that Becker lost their phone the same day of the murder, and another student, Taylor Perkins, confirms that Becker did not have their phone on the day of the murder. Taylor and Becker were both looking for their phone at the mall.
Did you notice anything else about the cell tower data?
Cell tower data is not remotely like GPS information. Since we don't have the actual phone and we can't look at the GPS date, we don't know that the phone was even near the victim's house.
Did you observe anything about the cell towers near Brackman's residence?
The cell tower near the victim's residence covers a wide area. The person with Avery's phone could have been covered by the one tower, and it could have been far away enough to not even see the Brackman residence.
What about the cell tower near Becker's residence?
Becker lives by a major traffic route, so the person with Avery Becker's phone could have just been merely driving by and have been nowhere near the house.
Did you find any fault in the investigative practices related to the cell tower data?
I find fault in the fact that Detective Markowitz only looked at the information of the cell phone tower related to Avery Becker's phone.
What do you believe should have been done instead?
The better practice would have been to examine the numbers of all of the phones in the area at the time of the murder and to track down any users that had any connection to Mr. Brackman. It would have also been smart to look at the cell tower data of Taylor Perkins' phone to confirm their alibi.
Did you take any steps in your review to fill in these missing gaps?
I looked more closely at the call detail records Detective Markowitz obtained.
What did the record show?
For each of the calls that Avery Becker sent out, there was a corresponding call or text from Taylor Perkins. Taylor Perkins' phone at the same time was relayed by 1191 Antenna 2.
What's the significance of this cell tower?
Antenna 2 covers the mall, and this matches the story of Becker and Taylor that they were at the mall at the time of the murder looking for their phone.
What else did the record show?
Later at 2:10 p.m., the records show that Antenna 3 connected the Taylor Perkins phone for an outgoing call to Avery Becker's phone. Since there's no corresponding phone call or text message from Avery Becker, this makes sense that Avery Becker's phone was either deactivated or connected to a different cell tower.
And what's the significance of this cell tower?
Antenna 3 covers the fry shack, and that's where Avery Becker and Perkins both verified they were.
While we're on the subject of phones, did anything stand out to you about the screenshotted text from Alex Cifuentes?
Yes, I'm stunned the police simply accepted screenshots of those text messages.
Why is that?
Well, screenshots, first of all, the police have special mobile forensic software the DPT uses Celebrite, and that allows them to easily download the contents of any cell phone, including the actual text messages on the phone.
In your expert opinion, what's the issue with using a screenshot of a smartphone?
Screenshots can be easily doctored. We have no way of knowing if those text messages are real or fake.
Moving on from cell phones, did your investigation lead you to any other suspicions?
In my investigation, I uncovered somebody who would have a much stronger motive to kill Mr. Brackman than Avery Becker, and that person is Blair Rollins.
What is this motive?
A few months before the murder, Mr. Brackman's represented Jonathan Rollins, Blair's father, who had been charged for murder. Jonathan Rollins was eventually convicted and sentenced to life in prison.
Did you find out anything else about Blair?
I looked at the photos from the CHS yearbook, and Blair Rollins had the same build and body shape as Avery Becker.
In your investigation, were you able to figure out where Blair was on the day of the murder?
I reviewed school reports and found out that Avery Becker was absent at the time of the murder.
Were any other students absent besides Avery Becker?
Yes, suspiciously enough, Blair Rollins was also absent from school.
And did you find out anything about what Blair did after the murder?
I found that Blair suspiciously disappeared closely after graduation.
Did you learn anything about Blair's relationships?
I learned that Blair and Alex are close friends.
And what do you believe is the significance of Blair in this case?
I believe that Blair proves that the police didn't go nearly in depth enough in their investigation, and that the investigation has left significant doubt as to who committed this crime.
Objection, Your Honor. This witness is not an expert in police practices and therefore cannot testify on the nature of the investigation and the police practices that were used.
Permission to respond?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Saros.
Sorry. Your Honor, this witness is an expert in general police investigation.
Any response, Ms. McCoy?
Yes, I still believe that the witness is talking about the police practices that were involved and therefore cannot testify about that subject.
I'm going to overrule the objection. You may proceed, Ms. Saros.
Thank you. Professor Van Owen, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Sure.
In your expert opinion, what do you believe the significance of Blair is in this case?
In my expert opinion, I believe that Blair proves that police didn't go nearly in depth in their investigation and that their investigation has left significant doubt as to who committed this crime.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Professor, I'd like to start by talking about your history of testifying in court. In your entire career, you've only ever testified for the defense.
Yes.
And you even like to think of yourself as a check on the power of the police.
I like to ensure justice.
So that's a yes.
Yes.
Let's talk about your analysis of this crime. As you mentioned earlier, you didn't do a full investigation into this case.
I only did a partial investigation on the areas I believed were overlooked by the police.
And you never visited the scene of the crime?
I did not. I used evidence given to me by other detectives.
And you assume that Detective Markowitz influenced some of Ms. Cusack's findings?
I did. After looking over both of their reports, it was apparent to me.
You also assume that Detective Markowitz planted the idea of Avery Becker as a suspect in Ms. Cusack's mind?
Yes.
But isn't it your own belief, Professor, that one should never assume?
Objection and proper character evidence.
Your response, Ms. McCoy?
This is not being used to prove a certain trait of Professor Van Owen, rather the contradictory nature of her statement.
Permission to respond?
Go ahead, Ms. Saros.
Your Honor, by making this statement, the opposing counsel is implying that Professor Blake Van Owen is being hypocritical in making this statement. The statement relating to Markowitz and Cusack is specifically within their area of expertise, and I don't believe that it's fair to take a statement that was not related to that and try to apply it in this scenario.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think it's proper. Go ahead, Ms. McCoy.
So that's a yes, Detective or Professor. It is your belief that one should never assume.
I never assumed anything. I don't believe anyone should assume anything.
Didn't you just agree with me when I said that you assumed that Detective Markowitz influenced Ms. Cusack's findings?
I looked at the detective reports and I could see that it was apparent that they were influenced by each other.
But you have no evidence to back that up.
I looked at the reports.
No evidence.
If that's not evidence.
All right, let's talk about the evidence that was at the crime scene. It's your belief that there was no sign of a struggle besides the scuff marks.
Yes.
But there was also a broken plate found at the crime scene.
Yes.
You don't address the broken plate.
We don't know when the plate was broken.
So that's a no.
No.
You don't address the open knife drawer.
No.
And you're not a certified crime scene reconstruction investigator.
No.
Isn't it one of your theories that Coach Brockman was killed by someone who came to his house specifically with the intent to kill him?
Yes.
But in the ring videos, the assailant clearly isn't holding a knife ready to kill.
The assailant is not holding a knife while he's walking into the house.
Thank you. Let's talk about the cell tower records. In rural areas, you say that a single cell tower might cover 100 square miles.
Yes.
But Avery Becker lives in an urban area where cell towers are more closely packed together.
Yes.
Which makes the data more accurate.
Yes.
And you say that the call detail records pertaining to Taylor Perkins' phone are accurate and consistent with them, her and Avery being at the mall during the time of the murder.
I believe they are accurate.
But you dispute the accuracy of the same call detail records pertaining to the location of Avery at that same time.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. You dispute the accuracy of the call detail records as they relate to the location of Avery Becker's phone at that same time.
Yes.
So you can't seem to make up your mind whether or not the cell tower records are accurate or not.
Objection argumentative.
Ms. McCoy?
Yes, I'm simply asking for clarification on the witness's position, as they are an expert in cell tower records, whether or not these records are accurate or not.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Go ahead.
I believe that the phrasing of the question, saying you cannot make up your mind about the cell tower records, did have a clear bias behind it, Your Honor.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Ms. McCoy, you can rephrase the question.
So can you decide if these are accurate or not?
Yes.
Are they?
I believe the cell tower records were accurate and we used them in the investigation.
But not as they relate to Avery's phone?
No.
So you acknowledge there's a discrepancy there?
Yes.
All right, and these records do place Avery's phone near Mr. Brockman's house at the time of the murder?
They do.
Finally, I'd like to talk about your compensation for being here today. You expect that your testimony today will make you at least $1,000?
That's what I'm paid.
So it's a yes?
Yes.
And that's in addition to the just under $7,000 that you've already made from consulting on this case.
What I make as a private investigator is the same as any other private investigator.
So that's a yes?
Yes, as a private investigator, that's how much money I make.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor, briefly.
Keep it to the scope of the cross-examination. Go ahead, Ms. Saros.
Professor Van Owen, did you conduct a partial investigation of the cell towers?
I did.
And which had a greater influence over your final conclusion? Your own the cell tower records that were a result of your own investigation, or the ones that you reviewed?
Objection, compound question.
I'm going to allow it. Go ahead.
Okay, I will repeat the question. Which had a greater influence on your final conclusion? Was it the cell tower records that you obtained in your investigation, or the ones that were obtained by the prosecution in their investigation?
The ones I obtained in my investigation.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anything further of this witness?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. The witness is excused. Does the defense have any other witnesses to present?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Okay. Ready for closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Sars, for the prosecution, you may go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you have heard the story of a disgruntled teenager with a history of violent outbursts when they did not get their way. On March 6th, 2020, Avery Becker, mad at their mock trial coach for kicking them off the team, broke into Mackenzie Brackman's home, committing second-degree burglary and first-degree murder when their coach died in the course of this break-in. Avery Becker's tragic arrogance and tragic choices led to a tragic consequence: the death of their coach, Mackenzie Brackman. Now, in order to prove that Avery Becker committed second-degree burglary, we must have shown that she entered unlawfully into a dwelling with the intent to commit criminal mischief against another person or property. Today, we have done just that. To show that Avery Becker broke into Mackenzie Brackman's home, we presented expert testimony of Jordan Markowitz, who showed you Exhibit 16, depicting the exact course that Avery Becker took to get from her home to Mackenzie Brackman's home on March 6th, triangulated through expert analysis of cell phone records from that day. You also saw Exhibit 12, video footage from the scene showing someone of Avery Becker's exact height and build breaking into Mackenzie Brackman's home. You also heard the testimony of Alex Cifuentes, who testified to the long-time animosity between Avery Becker and her coach, Mackenzie Brackman. You also heard Alex testify to Avery's history of vandalizing her coach's car when she was simply frustrated with him during practice. Finally, you saw text evidence of a conversation between Alex Cifuentes and Avery Becker in which Avery states her intent to break into her coach's house and trash it. Avery Becker had the motive and did break into Mackenzie Brackman's home on March 6th. In order to prove that Avery Becker committed first-degree murder, we must have 1, proven that they committed or attempted to commit second-degree burglary, and 2, that in the course of this break-in, the death of a person was caused by anyone. Through expert witness Kyle Cusack, you heard the story of a break-in gone wrong. On March 6, 2020, Avery Becker, mad at their mock trial coach, traveled to Mackenzie Brackman's home and broke in. When a struggle ensued between Avery Becker and Mackenzie Brackman, Avery grabbed a knife from her coach's home and stabbed him in the back, killing him. Now, the defense has tried to distract you today with wild theories about Blair Rollins and some far-fetched ideas of manufactured texts. Yet, all of these theories are vague and speculative. Instead, you have heard us, the prosecution, present ample evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker committed second-degree burglary and first-degree felony murder on March 6, 2020. The events that occurred on March 6th were a tragedy, but Avery Becker must accept the tragic consequences of their tragic choices. So, we, the prosecution, ask that you find the defendant Avery Becker guilty of all charges. Thank you.
And closing for the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Missing suspect, missing evidence, missing motive. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today we have proven that there is not enough evidence to convict Avery Becker of murder in the first degree and second degree burglary of a dwelling. The prosecution's case is built entirely on assumptions, as they refuse to consider other evidence and potential potential suspects, and instead decided to jump to the simplest conclusion, forcing an innocent young girl to face the consequences. First, on the defense, you heard from Avery Becker, who is nothing more than a confused child who had her previous mistakes exploited by the prosecution in order to paint a false narrative about her character. They painted her as an angry person with violent outbursts, but as it has been made clear today, Avery Becker is filled with nothing but guilt for what she done, and her anger was not a pattern of her behavior. Avery wanted nothing more than to apologize to Brackman for her actions at mock trial practice and to make things right. She never would have acted to cause more harm. The prosecution continually emphasized tragic arrogance, but as it has been made clear through the immense regret that Avery had for what she did to Brackman's car, she is not full of arrogance at all. Avery enjoyed mock trial, but it was not important enough to her for it to be a motive for murder. Missing motive. As Avery continually emphasized today, all of her arguments with Mackenzie Brackman were mock trial based, nothing more. The prosecution continually manipulated the actions of Avery Becker and the actions that Avery Becker took while under stress. She was nothing more than a senior in high school, a high school student that forgot her phone in a moment of intense stress. and they used that to paint the narrative that she's a liar and a murderer. Next, you heard from Taylor Perkins, who confirmed that Avery was with her all day long on the day of the murder. She also raised suspicions over another student, Blair Rollins, who the prosecution failed to investigate. Missing suspect. The prosecution has continually emphasized the importance of Avery Becker's height and build in this case, but they refuse to even look into the fact that Blair Rollins has a motive as well and is of a similar height and build. Finally, you heard from Professor Blake Van Owen, who brought the immense prosecutorial negligence in this case to light. She confirmed that Becker was physically incapable of committing the crime in the manner that the prosecution insisted on due to her physical stature, causing the prosecution's entire crime scene reconstruction to fall apart. Missing evidence. The prosecution mentioned and clearly acknowledged Avery Becker's height and stature, but refused to apply this to their crime scene reconstruction. Professor Blake Van Owen also confirmed Avery and Taylor's story using Perkins' phone records. This new evidence brings to light many gaps in the prosecution's story. On the prosecution, first you heard from Alex Cifuentes, who was greatly influenced by her jealousy of Avery Becker, and who stated that she would benefit from Avery being out of the picture. Alex Cifuentes also brought to light text messages that the prosecution based much of their case upon. However, there has been immense question as to the authenticity of these text messages, and the prosecution failed to look into this. Next, you heard from Detective Jordan Markowitz, who failed to follow proper investigative procedures throughout this case, simply accepting screenshots of Alex Cifuentes' text messages, despite having the technology to prove their validity. Finally, you heard from Kyle Cusack, who built a crime scene reconstruction based on minimal evidence. She is a crime scene reconstruction expert who has never fully reconstructed a crime scene, and she jumped to numerous conclusions, stating herself that she wished there was more evidence in this case. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it has been made clear today that there have been many inconsistencies within the prosecution's case today. They claimed that this was a tragic choice that Avery Becker made, while also claiming that this murder was not planned and it was an accident in the heat of the moment. It has been made very clear today that they have not, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in this case, the prosecution holds the burden of proof. And today they have failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Avery Becker is guilty. As a result of the missing suspect, missing evidence, and missing motive, you must rule that Avery Becker is not guilty on charges of murder in the first degree and second degree burglary of a dwelling. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that concludes this trial.
Your Honor, the prosecution did request to reserve time for a rebuttal close. May I give a rebuttal closing at this time?
Yes, the prosecution did do that. What is the time that was reserved? How much time was reserved?
Time check, keepers. 1 minute and 5 seconds.
Okay, I apologize. You may go ahead and use your reserved time, Ms. Hires.
Now, the defense has tried to sow seeds of doubt today, saying that our case is built on assumptions, jumping to the simplest conclusions. But you yourself have heard the evidence today. Who matched the height and build of the video footage from the scene? Avery Becker. Whose phone records showed them traveling to their coach's house? Avery Becker. Who sent texts stating their intent to break into their coach's house? Avery Becker. Who had long-time animosity with the victim today? Avery Becker. Who stated that she would get back at Brackman if it was the last thing she did? Avery Becker. When you look at all of this evidence, it is no longer the simplest conclusion, but rather the only logical one. So, we, the prosecution, ask once again that you find the defendant Avery Becker guilty of all charges. Thank you.
All right, now I think that does conclude this trial. I think we are allowed, if everybody wants to come back. I think we are allowed a little bit of time. Everybody did a good job keeping this to the time allotted. We are allowed a little bit of time for some feedback after this round, I believe. So do the scoring judges want to take a couple of minutes? I think we need to limit it to 2 to 3 minutes, I think is what the suggestion is, to make any comments about the members of the teams.
Sure. I'm happy to give feedback. Everybody did a great job. Can you all hear me okay? Okay. Everybody did a great job. Just to give you some background, I'm a prosecutor, so I love doing trials and love being in the courtroom and understand, I think, a lot of some of the difficulties and nerves that come from it. But you guys are all amazing for getting such a early start at all of it. I wish I would have done it when I was your age too. Prosecution openings and defense openings were great with their themes. Really nice tone used in Ms. McCoy, and you were really concise with your tone, your conviction about what happened. You did a nice job of giving a roadmap to the jury. And I would try not to use what the defense might say, but just generally, you may wonder about X within the case, but we're going to answer that question for you. Defense opening, I liked the theme again that you built up, that this was a case based on assumptions and missing evidence, and that there was a prosecution failure to consider other options. I might have missed it, but I thought that you should bring out the alternate suspect in opening of Mr. Rollins, because I didn't really catch on to that or hear a lot about it until you were in your defense witness mode. But really nice job in emphasizing the burden in your opening and reminding the jury of that right up front, that it's the prosecution's job. Prosecution witnesses, all three of the witnesses did a really nice job in your presentation, by the way, like your dramatic flair and your knowledge of the facts and pushing back on cross-examination appropriately, just straight across the board. Matea, Kia, and Ms. Selby all did a great job. The examinations, Ms. Kugler, great use of chapter headings, and everybody did a really good job responding to objections. You had a really logical layout in your direct examination, which I think a lot of people just tend to ask, what happened next? Or what did you think about that? And you used a lot of persuasion in your questions. And I thought you were right on the objection to Exhibit 14. You used to really use that well to publish to the jury as well. Cross-examination on the first witness. I thought you missed a couple of objections, but really good use in your examination of leading questions, and really nice layout of the possible framing of your client. Direct examination of witness Markowitz by Ms. Casilla Hires. Great expert foundation. You did a nice job publishing exhibits and walking through those and pointing out why they're really good for you with persuasive questions. The cross-examination by Ms. Kavi. One thing, I wouldn't voir dire an expert on their foundation unless you were like ready to hit them with some bad stuff. You kind of asked a couple questions and said, no objection. So maybe just save it. Some experts are just experts. We don't have to object to everything. But I really liked your cross-examination of pointing out the lack of work by Mr. Detective Markowitz to get the actual texts. That was a really strong point. Use that expertise against him, right? That he could have gotten these text messages, he could have requested the phone, he could have downloaded the phone, and instead he just like kind of did a half job on getting the texts. For Witness Cusack, the direct examination by Miranda. I thought that you did a good job. You could lay a little bit more foundation for your expert. JP did a really nice job of voir dire and pointing out the frailties in your expert's history and her abilities to testify. But you also did a really nice job not responding harshly to that. A lot of attorneys, I think, and I try not to, get heated and riled up after somebody voir dires my expert and points out their frailties, and you just had, I think, conviction and were confident that your expert was an expert. You had a you have a great confident tone, and you did a good job rehabilitating the expert. For JP, obviously, nice job on the voir dire. Great, you have a great tone in cross-examination because you lend the right amount of persuasion and pushback. Tried to go quickly, but I want to give everybody tips. Direct examination by Miss Kavi on Avery Becker. You had a nice soft tone, good open questions. Cross-examination by Miss Hires of Miss Becker. Again, you had a really good amount of confrontation and use of language that was incriminating in your questions. You used your tone to persuade, and I was listening a lot to that because of the use of inflection in your questions to tell me, oh, this is crap what she's saying, but without actually saying it. Practice a little bit on your impeachment. I think there was some bumps in the road with that, but you came out fine, and you got through it. Last couple defense witnesses. Defense witnesses also did a great job. Didn't fall for cross-examination questions that were tough, and you kept a really respectful, even tone, even though you had some heavy cross-examination by the prosecution. So really good job on the, on the witness front. Direct examination of Miss Perkins by JP. You did a great job on your response to the hearsay objection. You were right that I didn't hear hearsay either. And you made a good argument there. Cross-examination by Miss Kugler of Miss Perkins. Again, really good tone, good job showing her bias and her partiality towards the defendant, and really just breaking down that we shouldn't find her to be a credible witness. And really precise response and use of statutory language in your responses to objections. I liked how everybody was able to refer to statutes. And then finally, Van Owen. That was the really compelling witness to me. I was both pulled by the direct examination in one way. Miss Saros, you did a great job allowing open questions and allowing narration without drawing objections, which can be really tough. You could be more pointed with your questions. What did you find, or did you find anything else? I would say, did you find anything else that was lacking, or did you find anything else that was inconsistent with the prosecution's theory, that they ignored? You can be a little more direct with that. But really good use of questions regarding what's the significance of this, and referring to her consistently as an expert because she was your strongest witness, and great topics to break down the prosecution's case. The cross-examination, though, was really equally as good. That was why I found it so tough. Miranda McCoy, you had a great voir dire and you made a great argument to discredit her. I was kind of on board with you, even though I know experts tend to be admitted ultimately. And you had a really good tone in your cross-examination in response to the improper character objections. I thought you were right on that one, that you're allowed to undermine and point out her inconsistencies. Closing really quick. Let's see. I didn't put down, but for closing, prosecution closing, you did a great job with your body language, nice use of the elements. Remember to use stronger language. The victim didn't die. He was murdered brutally with a knife in the back. I think only once or twice you referred to him as dying. And he wasn't dying, he was killed. So always use that strong language, but you used all the right terms in pointing out that the defense theories were far-fetched and speculative and vague, and that reasonable doubts don't allow vague or speculative doubts, right? They don't include those. So you did a really nice job pointing that out, and a really great rebuttal using her name, Avery Becker's name, over and over and over again. I really liked that. Defense closing, liked that you stuck to your theme, of course, and I really liked that you rebutted the prosecution's theme. What's tragic here, is the false narrative about your client. What's tragic here is the arrogance on the part of Detective Markowitz to jump to conclusions. You did a great job pointing out, this is a high school student and she's a credible person and she, has an alibi and all of that. Sorry, I know that was more than 2 or 3 minutes, but I had so much to say about all of you. So I really am impressed by all of you and appreciate spending my Saturday morning with you. I hope that you all pursue this line of a career and enjoy.
I can go. All right. Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I won't go through each one, even though I did take notes just for time reasons. But it's obvious, and I say this every year. I think this is probably the third or fourth year I've done this. It's obvious you guys have spent a lot of time and energy and effort, and congratulations on doing this. And I agree that hopefully you'll consider a legal career as you move on. So, yeah, my name is Ron Young. I'm an attorney in Boulder. I practice primarily real estate litigation now, but over the years, I've done business litigation as well as real estate litigation. And so I've spent a fair amount of time in the courtroom. And in general, I think is what I'll make some comments on the opening and closing statements. You did a good job at finding subtopics or headings, whatever you want to call those. And I know that you're under pressure because you've got time limits, but take your time and, pause if you need to when you're giving your heading or changing your topic to allow the listener time to catch up basically in the thought process. I thought everybody did a good job at handling objections and be a little bit more clear when you're making the objection. That's in your, it's kind of on your side. You're the one that's going to make it. So you can think it through unless you've got, some exigent circumstances where you've got to get them to stop testifying. But like, for instance, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but the authenticity objection is a real broad objection. And then when asked about it, it really ended up being a best evidence rule objection. So just think those through a little bit before you make the objection. Also, you guys did a great job at not making a lot of relevance objections. I noticed that usually lawyers even will make a relevance objection. And really what that does is it invites the other side when they get ready to make an explanation as to why that question's relevant. It gives them an opportunity to start making their closing argument. So you really want to reserve any kind of relevance objections or objections that are going to allow the other side to start making their argument as to, yeah, this is relevant because it shows that, whatever it shows. So you guys did a good job on that. On voir dire of experts, I would agree with Jessica. If you're going to do voir dire, have a purpose. So if you're going to try to undercut their expertise and actually object at that time to their qualification, go ahead and do that. But if not, if you don't have that purpose in mind and you're just wanting to undermine their credibility, sometimes it's probably better to save that for cross-examination. All the witnesses did a great job, particularly, and I didn't write names down. I wrote witness number 2, sounded exactly like a cop. So maybe the law enforcement might be your calling later on. Let's see here. One thing I was confused about in the facts a little bit that wasn't developed I guess I had doubts about it, is what was the difference between whether the knife came from the block versus the drawer? And so I never did tie that together. I don't know which side of the argument that comes down on. I guess it would come down to benefit the defendant since, you've got the plaintiff has the burden. Let's see here.
You're at about 4 minutes so far, Mr. Young. If you want to wrap it up in the next one, I'll give about 5 for Ms. Marcos as well.
Great. It's amazing that we're going over time because lawyers really hate to talk. I would say use last names. When you get into the real courtroom, you're going to have to use last names. Referring to Blair, and is Blair this or Blair that, you're going to have to use the last names. Anyway, good job. I'll wrap that up.
Thank you. Ms. Marcus.
First of all, can you hear me okay? Okay. Not used to having the headphones on and talking. So first of all, I want to say this is my first year doing this and I am blown away by all of you. I appreciate the amount of time you put into this. the effort in incredibly hard circumstances. I can't imagine how it must have been to prepare for this during COVID. So kudos. You guys are all amazing. I am nervous to be in front of any one of you in court. How's that? Witnesses did a great job, especially, I think, let me get your name right, McKenna, sorry. You had a great command of your facts. And I think that was really, it came across very well when you spoke. And I wanna say that I think the other, my esteemed other judges really did a great job of going through each of you. So I just want to overall give you the encouragement to keep on doing what you're doing. I think that, certainly, I want to get your names right. Sorry about that. Elizabeth and Ms. Hires and Ms. McCoy, great job. I think that you, especially Ms. Hires, you did a really good job pointing out an inconsistent statement. You went back to the source. I think you did a really nice job doing that. I think everybody was on their game. JP, you did a really good job when you were confronted with making objections and not having the witness basically just back down. You cut people off when they needed to be cut off. Hard skill to learn. So I think with everybody else's input, mine's just kind of extraneous at this point, but I just want to thank you all for your time, your effort, and the opportunity to listen to you all. And if you ever want to talk to an attorney in Boulder, I'm available. I'm at the law firm of Frasco and Joyner. Please, by all means, reach out to me. I'm happy to speak with any of you.
Nice. I just want to comment briefly. My name is Sherry Mergalis. I don't come up on here, but I'm an attorney. I'm not a judge. But I did mock trial competition when I was in college and law school, and I loved it. And I know how much work goes into what you guys have done to prepare for this case today. And I just want to give you, big thumbs up and kudos, because I could tell every single one of you have worked really hard. You had a great grasp of the facts. You did really, really good with all of your objections and how they responding to those objections. You didn't overuse objections. I thought you guys just all as a whole did a really good job. And I want to say that my experience with mock trial really did help me, I think, become a better trial lawyer. I do mostly trial work. I do criminal defense and family law. So it is really kind of a good basis for you guys now to be learning and developing those skills and that confidence. And you all have that already. And as you continue to do that kind of practice, I think it's going to serve you very well if you decide to go into, law as a career. So keep up the good work. And I really enjoyed everybody's presentations. Thanks, everybody, and all the judges and all the great input. And so I think that's it. I'm not sure what we do now. Do we just leave and say bye-bye? I guess that's it. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
Keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
What is happening? What have I done? Oy vey.